Let's get back to the issue of the naturalness problem briefly mentioned in section before. The fact that the problem disappears completely in a supersymmetric theory is one of the most appealing aspects of supersymmetry, of sometimes we call it SUSY. So it deserves further elaboration. In the last 30 years, our understanding of renormalization in the context of particle physics has undergone a radical shift, or a paradigm shift, to use the of abuse expression, to explain the difference between old school of thought and the modern point of view. It is convenient to consider for regulator a hard cutoff lambda on the integration of momenta like this. This lambda decay. Of course, such a regulator breaks almost all symmetries usually encountered in particle physics and therefore is not practical. But for the purpose of building physical intuition about renormalization, nothing beats a good old momentum cutoff. The old view of the cutoff was that it had no physical meaning, that it was a purely mathematical sleight of hand introduced to make the intermediate steps of the calculations mathematically well-defined, and that, by consequence, it had to be taken to infinity at the end of the calculation. A renormalizable theory is, by definition, a theory in which any result for physical processes can be mapped cut-off independent in the limit lambda approaching infinity by redefining, i.e. renormalizing the finite number of parameters appears in the Lagrangian, or the so-called bare parameters. By contrast, the modern point of view is that all the quantum field theories we know, possibly with the exception of M theory, but all quantum theory fields we know are to be treated as effective field theory. i.e. theories that are approximation of more fundamental quantum theories, and in that context the cutoff must be viewed as a physically meaningful parameter. Whose value should not be taken to infinity. Instead, the finite value of the cutoff corresponds to the energy scale at which the effect of the new physics beyond the effective field theory become important. From that point of view, there is nothing wrong with non-renormalizable theories. As long as the process that are computed involve particles with a typical external non-loop momentum p, much smaller than the scale of the new physics lambda and p, their non-renormalizable contribution appear in the form of an expansion of the form sum n Cn p divided by lambda n p to the power of n, where the coefficients Cn are of order 1. As long as the momentum p is much smaller than the scale of new physics, one can neglect all but the first few terms to a given precision. Of course, the desired accuracy also dictates the number of loops used in the calculation. So there are two expansions involved in any calculation. Obviously, as p approach lambda and p, the whole effective field theory approach breaks down and one needs to uncover the more fundamental theory, which might itself be an effective theory valid only up to some higher scale of new physics. In some sense, effective field theories are the quantum equivalence of Taylor expansion in calculus, or the expression is square divided by 2 minus x3 divided by 6 is a good approximation to exponential exponent minus x, as long as x, the analog of p divided by lambda np, is much smaller than 1. If we use x equal to, we are outside of the radius of convergence of the expansion. We must replace the effective description 1 minus x plus x squared divided by 2 by the more fundamental expression exp exponential minus x. However, things are not as obvious in the context of quantum theory, because even if the external momenta are small relative to the scale of new physics, the loop momenta have to be integrated all the way to that scale. So it might seem at first sight that no matter how small the external momenta are, since the loop will be sensitive to new physics, the very concept of an approximate theory does not make sense in the context of quantum physics. However, the diagrams with external momenta much smaller than lambda np and internal momenta on the order of the scale of new physics are highly off-cell, and because of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, are seen by the external particle as local interaction with coefficients suppressed by power of the scale of new physics. A detailed and very pedagogical discussion of this point is presented by the paper of Peter Lepage, who has pioneered the use of effective field theories in bound state and in lattice quantum chromodynamic, or QCD. An excellent introduction to effective field theory is the paper by Cliff Burgess. Let us get back to the problem of naturalness. The key point to retain from the preceding discussion is that we must think of the cutoff as representing the scale of new physics, not as purely mathematical artifact that must be sent to infinity at the end of the calculation. Consider, then, an effective field theory that is to be regarded as an approximation of a more general theory for energies much smaller than the scale of new physics. The question is whether it is natural to have dimensionful parameters in the effective theory. Masses in particular that are much smaller than lambda and p. Of course, at tree level, there is never any naturalness problem. We may set the parameters of the effective theory to any value we wish. It is the loop that may cause some trouble, as always. There is a naturalness problem if the dimensionful parameters of the effective field theory are driven by the loops up to the scale of new physics. In that case, the only way to keep these parameters at their smart value is to impose an extreme fine-tuning of the bare parameters to cancel the loop contribution. To be more specific, consider the electron mass in quantum electrodynamics, QED, view as effective field theory of the electroweak model. View as the scale of new physics is therefore of order lambda np 100 GeV, which is much larger than the electron mass, because electron mass equal 0.511 GeV. EV. The question is whether if we introduce loop correction, it is natural for the renormalized electron mass to remain so small. The one loop correction to the electron mass depicted in the figure like this. This is one loop correction to a Fermion propagator. Now, it's roughly delta E integral of ln naive power counting will lead us to expect a linear divergence delta ME but the linear term in K in the numerator actually vanishes on integration, leaving us with a much milder logarithmic divergence. Even if we set lambda NP 100 GeV, we find that the correction to the bare mass is of order delta ME divided by E 19% relative to its 3-level value. This is a small correction, and therefore a small electron mass is natural in the context of QED as an effective field theory. Now, let's look at the masses of gauge bosons. This time, the two one-loop diagrams like this. This is one loop correction to a non-abelian gauge field propagator. The two one loop diagram contribute if the gauge group is non-abelian. Whereas only the first diagram exists if the gauge group is abelian. Schematically, the two diagrams give a correction to the gauge boson mass of the form delta ME square equal with alpha G K square power of 2, where M is the mass of whatever is circulating in the loop. Alpha G is the usual EG square divided by 4P, where EG is the gauge coupling constant. Gauge coupling constant. Simple power counting predicts this time a quadratically divergent result. But again, this contribution actually vanishes on integration. If the gauge symmetry is unbroken, the correction to the gauge boson mass actually vanishes identically, or delta mg square equals 0. If the gauge symmetry is spontaneously broken, the correction is not 0. But the quadratic divergence is still absent, and the leading correction is only logarithmically different. Like this. Square ln the NP divided by M. Once more, the correction is small even if the scale of new physics is much larger than the physical mass of the gauge boson. It is not fortuitous if the leading divergence in both our examples cancel out, leaving a milder logarithmic divergence. In both cases, a massless theory has more symmetry than the massive theory. The theory of a massless fermion has a chiral symmetry that ensures that the fermion will remain massless to all orders of perturbation theory. If we start with a massive fermion, the loop corrections no longer vanish, but they must go to 0 in the massless limits. This is why the one-loop correction to the fermion mass could not be of the form delta ME NP, because this will not vanish as the limit ME goes to 0. It is therefore chiral symmetry that protected us from the linear divergence. In the gauge boson case, it is obviously the gauge symmetry that is restored when the gauge boson mass goes to 0. Therefore, all correction to the gauge boson mass must vanish as the limit mg goes to 0. This is why we do not generate a quadratic divergence which would not have satisfied this criterion. This definition of naturalness has been formalized by Tihoff. A theory is natural if, for all its parameter p, so I will write it here, is natural if for all its which are small with respect to the fundamental scale lambda, the limit p approaching 0 corresponds to an enhancement of the symmetry of the system. Obviously, his lambda corresponds to our lambda NP. Let us now turn our attention to the mass of a scalar particle, e.g. Higgs boson in the Standard Model. One loop correction arises from the fermion loop. So the figure like this. Oh, sorry. And it corresponds to the integral h square This time, taking the mass of the scalar to 0 does not lead to any enhancement of symmetry, and we obtain a quadratically divergent correction. If we take the mass of Higgs to be the order of, let's say, 10 to the power of 2 GeV, and the scale of new physics to be of the order, the usual grand unification scale, about 10, 15 GeV, we see that the one loop correction is roughly 24 orders of magnitude larger than the 3-level value of ms square. Taking alpha 10 to the power of negative 2. This means that the bare square mass of the Higgs would have to be fine-tuned to 24 digits to keep the renormalized mass equals to its 3-level value. In other words, the mass of the Higgs is given by square C1 minus C2, where both C1 and C2 are of the order of 10 to the power of 28 GeV square, and have the same first 24 digits. This is a bit as if you were to throw a needle up in the air and watch it fall on a marble floor exactly on its tip and stay upright in that position. You certainly will be flabbergasted. It would not be impossible that it did land in exactly the right way to have it be in equilibrium and then be undisturbed by any air current after it landed. But it would seem so unlikely as to be preposterous. You certainly would look for some explanation for why this happened. Maybe this part of the floor is not marble and the needle penetrates the surface. Maybe there is a magnet under the surface and the needle is magnetized in such a way as to stay upright. We are in similar situation when pondering the mass of the Higgs in the Standard Model. There has to be some way to obtain a reasonable mass of the Higgs without invoking a mind-boggling accidental cancellation between two huge numbers. So why not simply say that the mass of the Higgs could be huge, of the order of 10 to the power of 15 GeV, because there are other constraints that this time put an upper bound on the Higgs mass. For example, unitarity of the S matrix leads to the constraint MH 780 GeV. This leaves us with only one possible way out. The scale of new physics must be much smaller than 10 to the power of 15 GeV. As criterion for absence of fine-tuning, it is natural to demand that a one-loop correction must be smaller than the 3-level value. Applying this to the Higgs mass in the Standard Model leads to lambda and p smaller or equal to mh divided by square root of alpha, which TeV. This makes the scale of new physics very low and accessible experimentally. What could happen at this new scale? It could be revealed that the Higgs boson is not an elementary particle, but instead a bound state, as in technical theory. So Higgs boson is elementary particle, but a bound state. Or maybe there are extra dimensions that can affect physics at the TeV scale, or again maybe particles are not point light but rather are excitation of strings. But let us assume that the Higgs still would be present as an elementary point particle in some new, more fundamental four-dimensional theory superseding the standard model in the TeV region. In that case, it would seem that the naturalness problem still would be present. The scalar masses now would be driven to the scale of new physics beyond this new theory, and we would be back to our starting point. Unless this new theory would possess some symmetry that would protect even scalar masses from large correction. And this is where supersymmetry makes its triumphant entrance. In theories with unbroken supersymmetry, quadratic divergence are altogether absent. So there is no naturalness problem. In theories with unbroken supersymmetry. This makes supersymmetry a very attractive candidate for a new physics lurking around 1 TeV.